succession planning, it's about developing to make sure individuals have the knowledge to make sure the organization moves forward. But it also is that space where you are building leaders. And so I know I've had conversations with a lot of people recently with remote work and the pluses and the negatives. And so it is tough sometimes to show somebody how to be a leader if we're only interacting on Zoom. And so how you show up as a leader, when, like you said, when you step in the room, when you set the temperature, you set the tone, you are not only giving knowledge to plan for succession, but you are also showing what leadership looks like, because that's a part of the succession as well. Because like I know, there are a lot of people that can manage a process, but not everybody is truly ready to be a leader. And so succession planning, I think it falls into both categories, is the knowledge piece to make sure that we can make sure operationally we are sound, but also the leadership piece to make sure that those individuals that have the knowledge are truly ready to be leaders.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people during the pandemic, again, there was a lot of shift and change, transitioned into leadership roles, and they were only comfortable with managing themselves and managing processes.
Absolutely. No
So I,
strategy.
yes, so it is. I think it becomes succession planning becomes a strategic component within an organization.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah. If you were, sitting down with a client and consulting specifically around succession planning, what are maybe three things that you could share in this moment that you really tell organizations, leaders of organizations, this is where they need to start?
So I actually have a proven framework and I'm pulling it up. And it's called the Ignite method, right? So you identify your key roles, you generate and gather your document. So what form we get it done. So the Ignite I is identify key roles. So what roles in the organization will you want to focus on as it relates to succession planning? And people come up with those differently, but many times it is those top leaders, those crucial positions where if you have a vacancy there, the rest of the organization is going to fill it. The G is generate and gather process documents. So those are the documents that you're going to use every single time to assess, to determine what the key roles are, what the core competencies are, how you're going to train, and those sorts of things. The N is needs assessment, which is those core competencies. What is needed to fill that role? What does someone need to know to excel in this particular role? The I is identify your internal talent. So who in the organization is already a high performer or high potential that could possibly move into that role? The T is train and develop. And I always like to start when I talk about training and development, I always like to focus on feedback. So once you have trained, once someone is doing a role, what is the feedback? I am really not a proponent of annual evaluations.
Okay.
I really prefer ongoing communication and feedback so that people are
Absolutely.
clear on what they're doing great and what they need to improve on so that they can become the best they can be. I think it's very unfortunate that some organizations operate where people are unclear, people aren't doing what's needed, are not filling their duties, and they have not been told. And so feedback for me is really a gift. It's something that I really honestly seek because that's the only way I can improve. And so to me, that's a critical component of training and development. And then E, the last letter is to evaluate. So be open to the idea that things may need to change. We may need to pivot a little bit because this may not be working. So you need to have an evaluation process in there where you're looking to see how is this succession planning working and what things do we need to do to make it even better. So that is 6 easy steps. I say easy because it's easy to me, but
It's
6 steps, 6 steps that if you follow them, you will have a plan in place. Even if, say, you have someone that's a high performer, and so they're really not ready to take the position just yet, but they're getting the skills necessary. And while they're gaining those skills, they're still helping the organization. And
Yep.
so it's just a situation where, as I mentioned earlier, all parties win.
You said a word. So and that's the coach in me, right? So I hear it, and you reference the word pivot.
Mhm.
What happens when an organization they're following the Ignite theory and they are going through step by step and they're building it out, and then that person leaves?
Mhm.
What does the pivot look like for that?
There are situations where you have either identified high performers, you've identified high potentials, you've even identified others in the organization that may be in a different department, because leadership is leadership in many instances. And I often say, I can teach a skill, but not a personality, right?
Absolutely.
And so if you have someone that shows those leadership characteristics and is willing to learn, that may be an example. And sometimes you have to go to external talent. But in the interim, you still have people that are better equipped and understand the premise of the role so that they can assist if you have to bring someone in externally, so that they can help share the whatever the company's name is way of doing things. Whereas if you have employees that are not a part of succession planning, that don't have upward mobility, that are disgruntled and in a culture where they're not happy, they're less likely to share if you end up bringing in an external candidate. As a matter of fact, sometimes they will work completely against the external candidate that comes in. But if you're having culture that we spoke about a minute ago, where everyone is willing to collaborate and work together and help each other, then if you do bring in an external employee, an external candidate, then they are more apt to work together in a system.
Yeah. So let's so same thing. You're kind of leading into my next question. Let's talk about that external candidate. So when we talk about creating a good succession plan, we know that it is strategic with purpose. How can succession planning add value to recruitment?
Absolutely. So employees are seeking, especially employees of today, are seeking organizations where the organization is committed to the individual. So if they have two job offers and one of them has pretty much the same salary, but has a robust training and development program, has a career path that leads to upward progression, they're more apt to take that position than one that does not. Gone are the days that the only thing you looked for was pension, because many organizations, quite honestly, no longer have them. And quite frankly, many employees aren't going to stay long enough to become vested in 2025.
True.
Things have changed, and so organizations have to change with it. So the things that employees were looking for 20, 30 years ago are quite different from what they were looking for or what they're looking for in 2025. And so what they're looking for now is really an organization that values them, that puts their resources into making them the best they can be, so that they can eventually either use it there or use it somewhere else. I tell people what that I coach, even when I was working within the organization, I want you to be successful whether you're here or somewhere else. I care about the person. And so sometimes this just isn't a good fit, but I still want to help you be the best that you can be, even if that means that you need to move on.